Time for another road trip, guys. We're in the awesome LT1 late model JK, and this time we have a 10-speed 10L 80 transmission, which is turning out to be a phenomenal transmission. We're going to go about 800 miles. We're going to fill up on gas. We're going to check our mileage. I'm going to try not to yak so much on this trip, maybe just stay to the facts, and we're going to check the mileage at each stop, and I'm not going to do the math on camera. I'll just do it off camera, let you know what it is so we don't waste time. I'm not going to try to baby it, and I'm not going to try to go aggressive. I'm just going to go the speed limit. So that should be a pretty realistic representation of what you can expect. Now, there's a lot of unrealistic representations. I know there's going to be guys that are going to say, I got 40s and 1 tons that are 20 inches wide, and I get 22 miles to the gallon. Check it out, guys. This guy blew by me. We're cruising at 70. On the uphill, he had to slow down. Now that we're flattened out, I'm sure he's going to accelerate out again. Yeah, there he goes. Now, we are staying in closed loop, if you can see. You can see our air fuel ratios at about 14.7. Now, you can see our upstream O2s are switching pretty good. When that line flatlines on the O2s, Rich, I'll back off a little bit and try to keep us into closed loop. So getting back to the last Jeep that got between 14 and 18 miles to the gallon, that Jeep was a little bit cleaner, didn't have all the stuff hanging off. Now I can get 18 miles to the gallon in my LS 6.2 in my personal Jeep. That Jeep is relatively clean, doesn't weigh a whole lot, and it's got 35-inch tires. So it just goes to show you, reducing that weight, reducing that drag makes a big difference. This Jeep, on the other hand, has everything. So what we're running up against right now is technology. The reason the LT1 and the 8-speed can get similar mileage to my lighter Jeep with the LS is the technology. I've got 11.5 to 1 compression in an LT1. I've got direct injection. I've got 8 transmission gears forward rather than 6. And now it looks like Mr. Jeep decided not to mess with the LT1. So this Jeep has got a 10-speed, and can I notice a difference? A lot of guys are, is there a big difference? Is there a big difference? Well, they're both really good right now, I can tell you that. The 10-speed does seem to shift a little bit more because it's got more gears, but I would be happy with either one. Now, this Jeep being loaded down like it is, I'm going to say from experience, I'd like to say I have no idea what it's going to do, but I do have an idea what it's going to do. I know it's going to be between 0 and 100 miles per gallon. As soon as we moved, we were over 0 miles to the gallon. It's going to be significantly less than 100 miles to the gallon. I would say we have about a 80% chance that we're going to get better than 10 miles to the gallon. And you might laugh at that, but, and by the way, we are going in and out of a 4-cylinder mode, which is pretty cool with these big 40s. I think the extra gearing and compression help us do that. So you might say 10 miles a gallon's a joke, but I would say my average guy on 40s, 1 tons, with all this drag and stuff going on, tell me that they're getting between 9 to 11 miles to the gallon with a V6. Feedback from guys that did our LS conversions say that they're getting about 10 to 13. So we're seeing 2 to 3 miles to the gallon better with the LS. Now it does seem to be that the LT is going to be 1 to 2 miles to the gallon better than that. And we're going to find out what advantage this 10-speed has on this typical lifted heavy JK on 1 tons and 40s. Now, this Jeep also has suspension that's not 100%, so we got a little bit of pull, which is causing friction. But I will say that this Jeep, if you remember, the sway bars were shot and it was going down the road like a drunken sailor. Now it drives really good. We put new sway bars on it. It feels like a new vehicle. So here's what you have, a 6-speed, an 8-speed, and a 10-speed. And mileage does seem to get progressively better every time you step up to a higher gear transmission. So you have to be realistic. If you're going to drive a Jeep on 1 tons and 40s in a headwind with all this stuff hanging off of it, you're going to be getting in the low teens, if you're lucky, maybe 11, 12 miles to the gallon. We'll see. This 10-speed can keep this engine in its power band. 4-cylinder mode can reduce the fuel consumption. the high compression, continuous variable valve timing, all come together to make the engine as efficient as it can be. But we're still pushing a lot of weight with a lot of drag up a hill, and it just takes X amount of energy to do that. I had a customer call me yesterday, and something that really gets me is he had a JL and he had a LS3 installed in it. You also have to remember, guys, these engines are stock GM powertrains, stock computers, stock harnesses, stock operating systems. There's definitely room for improvement in performance and economy. We can do economy tuning. Now, what I find about these LTs is they do tend to stay in closed loop, where the LSs and the Hemis will go into open loop. We're going up a significant grade right now, and check those O2s out. You see them flat topping a little, but for the most part, we're staying in closed loop. So the performance enrichment that we worry about with the other engines isn't as important with these engines, and a lot of that has to do with the inherent torque of these engines and the fact that they have the high compression in the CVVT, the cylinder pressure, to pull it off. So getting back to the JL, this customer has a JL with a, I'm not sure if it's a 6-speed or an 8-speed, but it's behind an LS3. It is a 2019 JL. Hey guys, everybody has choices, but putting a 10-year-old engine in a brand new vehicle, in my opinion, makes no sense at all, and it's not legal. And at some point, if you have that configuration, you may get caught. Your $100,000 Jeep may get flagged, and worse, impounded. So what we try to do is we try to work with the law and not do the easy thing and just get it done. The flip side of that, though, is GM has done such a fabulous job with these LTs that now we're outperforming the LSs and the Hemis, getting better economy, better drivability, better transmissions, all while staying legal. I remember taking this exact road just over 10 years ago on my own Rubicon, just like that one back there, and trying to hold the speed limit on the 15 freeway, and it was a misery, complete misery. And that's one of the reasons I started Motec. And you can see we're pulling these grades at the speed limit while staying in closed loop. I'm sure that poor guy is revving his engine up to 3, 4, 5,000 RPM, and I'm just sailing along in comfort, other than all the wind noise. I know I can. I know I can. Little Rubicon back there is trying to pass that motorhome. Poor guy. Guys, Valley of Fire. Take that road all the way down, but instead of going left to the national park, go right to Bitter Springs. And there's some awesome wheeling back there and some awesome colors. They did movies back there with John Wayne and such, a lot of westerns. There is the Man Store. It's essentially mostly alcohol and fireworks. This is an Indian reservation, so they're not illegal here. So this is a little disappointing. We've only gone 50 miles and we're off the peg. We're not on full anymore, but that was kind of to be expected. So that kind of shatters any hope of breaking records, but it is what it is. Our little buddy's making some time up. We got some downhills here. See how he can catch us. We had a long downhill, so here comes little buddy, but now we're going up this hill and it's going to be grief. I want to get back to that story because that's really one of the reasons I started Motec. Is I got a brand new 2009 Rubicon and was going to take it to New York, or did take it to New York, and took this exact road up through Utah, and it was miserable. We had the 30-inch too tall Rubicon tires, no modifications, all stock. Going up some of these slight grades was pure misery. The engine was revving up, it's dropping down into third, dropping down into second. My wife wanted to know why we couldn't go the speed limit with the other cars. Bottom line is, she said, we're selling this Jeep when we get back to Vegas. It was that disappointing. It got so bad when I was up near Park City trying to go 70 miles an hour, the transmission was downshifting into second, and my speed was changing as it would upshift and downshift. Come on, little buddy, you can do it. I got pulled over by a cop and asked me why the sudden speed changes, and I explained to him it was on cruise control, and that was the upshifting and the downshifting of the transmission. He didn't write me and said, get a bigger engine next time, and that's exactly what I did. So I'm sailing up this grade here like nothing, and look at our poor little buddy. He's fading out again. Well, there goes little buddy. We're on a downhill, so he blew by us at about 80 miles an hour. But the turtle and the hare, I'm staying in 4-cylinder mode quite a bit. Not as much as I did with that 8-speed and that lighter Jeep. But pretty much anything downhill is in 4-cylinder mode, and then on some of the flats if there's not a lot of headwind. So I'm thinking that the 4-cylinder mode is a good thing, even with these 40s and the LTs. That was a question that I had. It's not annoying at all, so you might as well leave it on. We're just arriving at the Virgin Gorge, and we used a quarter of a tank. We've gone almost exactly 100 miles. So I'd like to see 125 to 150 miles at a quarter of a tank, but that just reflects that this is a heavy Jeep with heavy tires, a lot of aerodynamic drag, but this LT pulls it along with style. So we'll see what the actual numbers are when we get to the gas station. So we're in the 80 mile an hour zone, and as stated, we're going to go the speed limit. It has been pretty hot out, pushing about 100 degrees, and the engine's been running cool. So we're going to keep 80 miles an hour up for the next few hours. We're down to about 2/3 of a tank. We've gone 138 miles. So again, we're not going to set any records, but we'll see what the numbers are when we get to the next gas station. We're just outside of Beaver, and we hit 200 mile mark. We've used about 2/3 of a tank. So one of my goals was to get 200 miles on a tank comfortably. And believe it or not, I get a lot of guys calling me, whether they have V6s or Hemis and even LSs, but when they have Jeeps that are all pimped out with 40s and 1-tons and light bars and all the other crap that they put on them, 200 to 220 miles to the tank is really all they expect. So we just crossed over 200 miles, and we have 1/3 of a tank left, and we're cruising at 80 miles an hour. So that's promising. So we've gone about 225 miles. We still have 1/4 of a tank left. We're going to go ahead and get gas here. I'll tell you what, at 80 miles an hour, you can really hear and feel this light bar grabbing the air. When you get a wind gust, you can feel the whole vehicle slow down. And we are going into a headwind. So we're going to get gas here. We'll see what the mileage is, and then we'll continue on. Here we are in Beaver. We went about 230 miles. As you can see, this JK's got a lot of stuff on it. We got the 1-tons, we got the 40s. This is not a good thing here. We've been running pretty cool. We were hitting 220s, which isn't really that bad, but you can see most of this is blocked. He may choose to change that when we, or when it gets hot here in Las Vegas. You can see we got a high lift jack. This light bar really does create a lot of drag. You can feel it. Walking around the back, we got a fast top, tire carrier, and we've always got to have a flag. Okay, so we used 16.65 gallons. So let's do our computations. I thought I'd show you under the hood. I don't do that often enough. This is a Corvette LT1, and you can't see very much of it. This is our new compact intake. We're running a K&N filter, but look how low it is. You got plenty of hood clearance. This intake is from a Camaro or a Corvette. You can of course run the valve cover trim covers off of a Corvette or a Camaro, and some guys do that. I kind of like them the way they look stock, but there looks to be a lot less stuff in this engine compartment now than when it had the 3.6 Pentastar engine in it. Here's our coolant overflow bottle, and this Jeep has got an S-Pod. There's our E92 controller. So it's a pretty compact setup. We've got our polished aluminum valance cover on this, and that does help hold the air in or direct it through the core rather than around it. Now this vehicle does have a pretty decent transcooler. That transcooler up front is a Pentastar cooler, and it's an excellent cooler. It is being mostly blocked by this, but still the trans temps ran pretty cool on the way up. We're using stock power steering hoses. You can see we're using the stock power steering reservoir on this setup. You guys know what I feel about Optima batteries. You will notice we have our standard engine oil dipstick tube, but we're not running the transmission dipstick tube because there's no place to run it. We are servicing the 10-speed transmission right now, just like GM, where we fill it up to the service ports, but we are coming up with a solution where we will have some kind of a fill tube in the future. On the LT6s, the AC lines are pretty tight. You notice that these late model AC lines fit tight up against the firewall. That's the setup you got to run. So let's continue our journey. We went 230.5 miles. So let's plug that in. 13.96, 14 miles to the gallon. So that's not terribly great, but it's not terribly bad. Actually, I think it's pretty decent considering we went 80 miles an hour in a Jeep with a lot of drag that's been lifted with 1 tons and 40. So we're leaving Salt Lake. We did drive around up there quite a bit. We went to the Great Lake. So we're over 500 miles now. We got gas up near the lake and we put 15 gallons in. So I'll do the math on that and come back with it. So here we are on the last leg of the journey. We went just over 900 miles in this LT1 powered Jeep. It performed excellent, 0 issues. Even ran cool, which is surprising considering this, although the fan percentage was running higher than I'd like. So I will recommend that the customer correct it. But other than that, it was a pretty good trip. We ran into a lot of wind. We ran into some rain, and this light bar here really was a wind catcher, and I think that did affect our economy. Well, I mean, if you look at the high lift jack, the lift, the light bar, and everything else, we get a lot of drag